Hey everybody, it's the first of the month, so you know what that means. It's time for the next episode of Thirds on First.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. It's Thursday. So that means it's time for another episode of Thirds on First. And even more so, this is our finale episode of season 2. And you may notice that there are some special guests joining us today. And that is because today we are going to be talking all things Black love. And we wanted to have the perspective of some gents. So we are going to jump right into it. The reason we wanted to talk about this topic today is because there in recent years has been a proliferation of social media and other, TV criteria that have come up to discuss Black love, both from the marital and the single perspective, in order to help folks really sort of navigate this new landscape of dating in the modern era and create sort of a rules of engagement and try to figure out how to successfully foster relationships. And so, what has really kind of come out of all of that is that there may be a disconnect between parties and really how to, navigate this brave new world. And, what are the significance of relationships in today's era? And how do we really make those successful? So, wherever you fall on the spectrum, married, single, dating, or otherwise, we wanted to really kind of dig into how, things can move forward and do so more smoothly. So, this episode aims to do just that. And you already know who the thirds are. So, I'm going to allow our guests to introduce themselves. And so, gentlemen, if you want to start, just a brief introduction about who you are and anything you want to tell us about yourself.
Raashid?
All right. Well, my name is Raashid Williams. I'm a lawyer, been married for almost 10 years, and I've known the thirds now for a good little while. So I'm just happy to be on the podcast. Thanks for the invitation.
Thanks for being with us.
Ronald Cache Falls Jr., also a lawyer. I've known, I guess, parts of the thirds longer than others, but I've had the pleasure of knowing the thirds for a few years now. I am 43. I live in Los Angeles. I am a professional. I'm constantly engaged in this conversation about dating, Black relationships, marriage, and others. I have female friends, I have cousins, I have, just people within my ecosystem that are constantly gripping with this conversation from different perspectives and trying to figure it out. It seems that we're all trying to figure it out in some way, shape, or form. So happy to participate today and kind of give my perspective on what I see happening from a male perspective and also some of the input that I see from some of my female friends.
Well, gentlemen, thank you both for being with us today and for giving us that introduction about yourselves. One thing I do want to point out is yes, you now have a panel of all lawyers. So we recognize that in many ways we are not covering the full spectrum of dating relationships. But this is going to be a conversation amongst friends, and you will see how things play out in our sort of universe. And, and we are not attempting to cover, everything. We recognize that, there this is not a fully diverse panel, but I think there will be a lot of fruitful discussion that comes out of it. And so with that, I think I'm just going to jump in with our first question, which is open to all of our panelists, but from your perspective, are there differences in how men and women approach relationships and dating? And has this perspective changed as you've gotten older or further along in your career?
Um, I would say yes. Depending on where you start in this. So, most people begin dating in high school, right? You start trying to figure out who you're interested in and who you think is cute or who you want to go to the prom or Sadie Hawkins or something like that with. And then you get yourself an environment for folks who go to college where you're in another ecosystem and you're trying to kind of mature, grow, figure out things about yourself, but also date. And then as you continue to progress, you become a professional, you're kind of out here in the world, you're paying bills, paying taxes, and, living life. And dating, has all these other factors and variables that come into play. And I think for people of color, for Black people, these factors are magnified in some ways So I think it does evolve over time. I think the way that you date or try to date or learn about yourself at an earlier age should be different than the way that you date as an older person with more experience. As you've been through certain relationships, you should have taken some piece of learning from that about yourself and about what you want and applied that to the next situation that you find yourself in. So hopefully you're evolving along the way as you learn more about yourself and about ultimately what your prospects are.
Yeah, I'm going to echo that sentiment. I mean, just speaking from my own perspective, when I first started dating, I was just out of law school. I was 25 and I just joined the Army. So by virtue of my career path, I was kind of in a transient place, right? Like I was stationed in Augusta, Georgia. I really didn't want to be in Augusta, Georgia. It was right when the Iraq War was starting. So I thought I was going to get deployed pretty soon thereafter. So like everything about me was temporary, right? From my living situation, my professional situation, my location, and what the hell was going on in my life at the time. I had no idea. So if I met somebody and dated, it was with the perspective that, hey, I might be gone in 6 months, or realistically, I might be dead in a year. Like that's how real it was for me. And for me, I didn't start, I guess the better word is intentionally dating until I got transitioned to Maryland. I said, okay, this is where I want to live and this is where I want to be. And I feel like this is home for me. And then I started kind of dating. At that time, I was also 30, right? So at that point, I was more stable, looking at buying a house, doing some other things. So yeah, it really depends on where you catch that person in their life. Between 25 and 29, I'd be honest, I probably wasn't the best brother to be dating. Because you ask me, hey, where's this going? I tell you, I don't know where I'm going right now. I can get a call tomorrow and be like, all right, you going to Afghanistan? I'm like, okay. And then I'll be off for a year. So, it wasn't until I got myself situated and stable that I could start, looking at a future where it was more sustainable to be with another person.
I think when you're younger too, right? Like we hear so much about this concept of intentionally dating, but like at 43, in my mind, I'm like, how would you be intentionally dating in your 20, like especially in your like teens and 20s? Like, dude, you don't even know who you are at that point. And so like what I think about when I dated in college and law school, which was more like hanging out, having fun, like companionship, but not necessarily thinking about lifelong, versus out of law school, professional, and like how I'm starting to think about dating. But even then, I was still in a phase of defining me and figuring out what mattered to me and navigating my life. And then now, divorced with a child, it has an entirely different perspective for me, because I'm like, I got priorities and they come first. And like, how do you fit? What's that? Is that Lettucey song? How do you add to me? Like, I love that song. But like it becomes more that, and I think it just evolves depending on your life stage, just like relationships evolve as your life stages change and grow.
So I would call myself a serial monogamist. So I think I'm the only one on the panel who's been married twice. And so I was with my first spouse a total of 10 years, and I've been with my current spouse for 14. So that takes up a lot of my adult dating life. But I can remember in the short periods of time when I was dating, feeling like as a woman navigating the dating world, I felt a lot more pressure to kind of be this gatekeeper on who do I let in, and having to be chaste and make sure that I wasn't like giving it up too easy and all that. And I feel like men are more free when they're dating, and I'd be interested in hearing from those of you who are single, because I haven't been in the dating world for a while at this stage, midlife. Are men still feeling more free? are women still feeling like they've got to play a certain role? We talk a lot on this podcast about men being told to be brave and adventurous and women being told to be perfect and safe.
I will take that one, and I guess I will just start the shit. So I will say this first. There is a shift in the power dynamic in dating between men and women, and then going down to sort of the very specific demographic of Black women and Black men dating, and then more specifically Black professional men and women dating. So way down into the cone. There is always going to be the traditional nature of the pursuit and the pursuee for a man and a woman. And I think traditionally there is some element of that has to remain. But I think we have all these confusing messages that come at men and women and trying to figure out how to date, how to interact, how to socialize. Do you call back? Do you text back? Are you thirsty? Are you not? Are you too free? Are you too open sexually? How much do you show? How much do you do all these things? And I think people get so lost in all these like silly rules and metrics and trying to figure out how to do the perfect thing that they lose the authenticity of just being themselves and allowing who is going to come to them to come to them. The people that are interested in you are going to be drawn to those qualities or characteristics that are authentic to you and what you're doing. And I would say on the reverse side of that, those things that do not appeal to you will stand out as this doesn't work for me. So hopefully as you're kind of learning your way through that, you make better choices. I would say at a younger age, you probably should not have as much pressure on the dating and finality aspect of what's happening. So every person you meet is not going to be your husband or your wife. You only have to get it right once. And Nicole, as you said, you got it right twice. So I think you happen to be in a hyper minority in the sense that you're a Black professional woman that got married twice. That doesn't statistically happen a lot for us. So there's that. The reality is when I was in college, when I was at Morehouse, as a young undergrad and dating, I didn't know a lot about relationships and also where I was going or what I was doing. Raashid, you touched on something earlier, and I used to always warn my female friends, be careful when you try to find and lock down men in transition as they are trying to figure out where they're going and what they're doing. If you are trying to attach yourself to that or insert yourself in that, you run a very high risk of basically getting your feelings hurt or being collateral damage in the dynamic. And it may not necessarily have anything to do with you as an individual, but the circumstances that you were up against. So you have a brother just graduated from college, but it may be going off to deployment in a year. There's nothing you can really do about the context of that because those are the facts. So you have to make choices. All right. Is my investment in this person going to be enough that I want to work through that? Or do I want to now take what I've learned in this relationship and go somewhere else? We talk about sexual interaction a lot. And I think you have to be honest. There are two schools of thought about men, I think, in the context of sex and how it happens in relationships. There are some men that are kind of in the double standard, having sex and sexual interactions in the dating, context is expected and just something that normally happens. And then there are other weights or assumptions that are placed on when or how it happens that can color the dynamic of the relationship. I think if you are authentic to yourself in that, if you are comfortable experiencing and doing certain things and you're able to communicate and articulate that, you can draw boundaries for your comfort level in the context of dating. And when it works, that there are people who respect those boundaries, you can continue to have a relationship and learn from it. And for those people who don't respect those boundaries, those are clear indications that you should not be learning in relationship dynamics with those people. If you're not comfortable with doing certain things or experiencing certain things, I don't think that you should do that in order to allow yourself to have the opportunity to date certain people, because then you're uncomfortable compromising your values or your authenticity in order to try to get something. There are some really nasty statistics, and as a mathematician and a physicist, I think you can't run from the reality. There is a significant percentage of women and men of color who are going to experience difficulty in finding a life partner. Now, if you go into the context of men and women, statistically, it looks like it's going to be a lot more difficult for Black women and Black professional women to find partners and life partners. People can argue how they feel about that and all these different things that they want to do and approach that under the sun, but the numbers are the numbers. And so this is what's going to happen. So people have to make decisions about what that means for them individually. If you are navigating this dating world, you see what the outcomes look like mathematically for people, and you know that 1 in 4 women will not find a life partner on the numbers, Or what are you doing to try to make sure that you find yourself in that 60% if being married and having a life partner is that important to you? It's just being honest with yourself about the statistics, the math, and who you are and how you fit into that construct. So I think people have to be learning along the way and have to be thinking about some of these things in a more intelligent manner and being honest. Stop taking advice from your friends. Listen to people who have relationships that you admire and want to emulate. Spend time with people who do the types of things that you are interested in doing, that you'd be interested in doing in your partnership. I think people just have to make smart choices if they're trying to get to that outcome or certain outcomes.
And I think to your point about like knowing what's important to you,
Yep.
and being okay with that, because that's so like being back in the dating game, if you will, and I use that so very loosely, because I have all kinds of feelings about it. But like it's different. All of this stuff is different. This whole online thing, I have added and deleted apps about 800 million times. It's this weird dynamic. And what I also find, and I know the three of us have talked about this on numerous occasions, like that 40, when you cross that 40 threshold and you start to get to that, I don't really care what y'all think stage, like the whole dynamics about expectations of women and how you behave and how you show up and how you embrace or don't your sexuality, like all of that goes out the window, and you start to kind of walk in who you are. And when you do that, it also changes the lenses through which you interact with people. There's a meme that's been circulating lately, and I've had this conversation on so many occasions. I think we've talked to y'all about it like offline around, the idea of if you're getting married or a life partner later in life, like the meme says, can we have three houses, like your house, my house, and then a marital house, right? This whole idea of like separate houses, but I was like, we together, but I see you, like at this age, I've had a lot of conversations where this is like real appealing, and folks are like, I like this. What does that look like? And I think we're in a generation where we are redefining life partnerships and dating and whatever that looks like for ourselves, separate from the constructs that we were raised with, which is a really interesting kind of space to navigate. And I even see it in how I see my friends navigating their marriages, right? Like people are really defining stuff for themselves and not so much in what we saw our grandparents and parents grow up in.
And so Sheeta and Ron, I think you both touched on, some really critical points of authenticity and also how that plays into dating intentionally, as Raashid mentioned before. I think that begs for like a larger part in this, affords opportunity for our married folks to chime in as well. Like when you are trying to be authentic and you are trying to, be intentional about your relationships, how does that impact what you are looking for in a counterpart? Like, how does that change things? I mean, because clearly you've transitioned from this more, sheer companionship type situation to something that fits more squarely into your life. Some of my friends call it, main character energy. So if you are the main character of your own life, you are being your own authentic self, you are now looking for someone who matches with you. How does that affect what you're looking for in a counterpart?
Well, I will tell you that when I moved to Maryland, I think that's when the intentional dating phase of my life really began. And again, I hate to go back to this, but in a lot of ways, I grew up in a military household. So I had this army wife concept, if you will, right? And so in a lot of ways, when I started really like settling down and dating, I was looking at, okay, who can hold their own when I bring them to these, military balls and these social situations and these professional situations, and how do they interact with other military spouses? How do they interact in professional situations? And I remember I was dating this one girl, and I took her to it was like a luncheon of some sort, and she ain't hold up too good.
Done.
Out.
Done.
And it was one of those things where I just, I'm talking to one of my clients, and she's talking to one of the spouses, and it was a one-way conversation.
Oh man,
I said, I can't go too many places with this one right here.
that's real.
That is huge. It's
real.
a test. We used to do this at a young age, the observation, how people engage or how they work in certain rooms. And people don't know that they're being observed in the context of dating. For people who are thinking about that idea of partnership, thinking about how do you operate in a cocktail room, or how do you operate in a different world that a man may walk through. A man is thinking about that. Can I take you home? Can I take you to the hood? Can I take you to the boardroom? Can I take you to the meeting with the military wives? And if you are not in a situation where you naturally perform on that, you may have no idea that you are losing like a lot of traction. Or she does. I hear that a lot.
Amount of traction. I mean, and it's also like, listen, between 2002 and 2008, I almost got deployed to Iraq, Afghanistan, or I got sent to Korea. So in a lot of ways, I'm not only thinking about how do you interact in these professional situations where I may bring you even after the military, right? Like, Christmas parties at the firm or something like that. But also, look, if I have to leave this house for a year or two, am I comfortable that you can hold down the household with kids and interact with my parents and so on and so forth while I'm gone? So I don't have to worry about that while I may be possibly getting shot at, right? Like beyond just the, hey, we vibe well together type thing. When you start intentionally dating, you're starting to look at the context of life partnership and, if I don't make it back home, am I comfortable that you, uncle, grandma, grandpa, is that a stable family environment where my future kids are going to be in a good situation, right? Like when you start looking beyond, hey, we vibe out, we have great conversations. It's, hey, listen, this partnership thing is real. There's a teamwork aspect to this that is very important. And these are traits that aren't really thought about in the initial stages in the 20s. But when you start getting in your 30s and you start thinking about the future and what it looks like, the criteria of evaluation gets a little bit larger. And when I started looking, I went through a couple where, you can't vibe in professional situations. Or I went to your house and it looked like a bomb exploded in there. And it wasn't necessarily as clean as I thought it should be for a single person. I'm like, well, if you can't keep your own house clean, what you gonna do when you got 2 little kids running around? Like
these are your natural habits.
Yeah, like this is
how you practice is how you play.
Yeah, exactly. This is you by yourself before you have human beings to support. So all of these things I'm looking at like, okay, no, and it wasn't even about cooking. I'm just talking about the basic logistics of maintaining a household and handling yourself in professional situations. When I started really looking hard, there was a whole lot of people who didn't kind of meet that next level threshold of what I was looking for in a life partner.
I think that is just very interesting. It's so much more methodical than the way I approach relationships, because for me it's a much more of a heart analysis than a head analysis, and it has worked out for me in my marriage. And the funny thing is, when I was married the first time, I basically tried to contort myself into who I thought I needed to be married to this person, and felt like if I could just get this dude down the aisle, everything will be fine, right? And it so was not fine. Yeah. And I was like, this isn't fun. I'm not going to do this anymore. Got divorced and really thought I would stay single, and then met my husband, and everything really just fell into place. But listening to Raashid, who, you know, was, in full disclosure, was in my wedding, is one of our best friends, was with my husband the night that we met. It's just interesting to hear this methodology coming into play. And I was certainly more intentional the second time getting married, because I was like, okay, you know, you can fuck up once, but maybe you don't want to do it twice. And so, but it was really for me a much more internally focused assessment of, was I really bringing my full and authentic self to this relationship? Could I be who I am fully in this relationship and have this other person not just accept it, but embrace who I am? And could this person, could I see this person allowing me to grow and evolve into whoever? Because I mean, look, I'm not the same person I was when I was 25 or 30 or 35. I continue to evolve and grow. And for me, it's like, who is the person who's going to be your cheerleader and be like, yeah, be who you are, and not try to put you into a particular box or frame.
You know, it's interesting because I'm listening to the conversation, and you know, Cash and I have had this conversation. The other full disclosure, we've been friends for like 20 some years. So we've had this conversation a lot. But I find, and I'm wondering, I'm thinking back to our origin stories, and I'm wondering if some of that plays in, because I find doing both, right? Like what you just said, Nicole, about like, can you grow with me? Can you rock with me? That plays in. But I also play out, I have a very close, immediate family. Can you show up and kick it with my brother and how we roll? Can you show up with my parents and my grandparents, and like, will you fit into those circles, you know, the family I was born into and the family that I have chosen? Or are you going to be the one that's on the outside? And I think it's very similar in my marriage. I very much was like, you know, kind of, there was some check the box things, and the kind of that I changed to fit. And the reality was that other stuff that y'all were methodically thinking about actually wasn't present. And so how do you, like, just thinking about how navigating those things, it just really is resonating to me, because I'm like, I actually do both. I do the tests and I do the, you know, heart piece as well, which can sometimes make it more challenging, because you can be really drawn to somebody and then there can be that one thing that you like, yep, nope, done.
But you have to be, and I say this all the time, there are billions of people in this world. And if you are trying to partner, you're only trying to get to one. Mm-hmm. And if that person is not for you, and I've said this for years, the sooner you move away from what's not for you towards what is for you, the more you can stop wasting time. And if that one thing is on your list and you're like, this is it, don't change your rules. Like, if you know this doesn't work for you and you are self-aware enough to say, these are the things that I need and that I want, and this is what I'm not going to give up. If you get to one of those things, this person is great, I feel this way, and that one thing is missing and you're being true to your code, that person got to go.
Yeah. And it's more efficient, right? There's economics of telling somebody, hey, listen, I'm not gonna waste my time with you because I got to get to who I really need to be with. Yes. And you know, if you've lived in the dating world for a while, you kind of know there's some deal breakers out there. I remember I dated a girl and her family was crazy. Like, everybody was crazy. And I saw it. I went to her house, picked her up, and I said, Mama crazy, your daddy crazy, your brother crazy. Okay. But if you marry that person,
now you crazy.
Everybody crazy, including you. Right. So even though your heart may be like, oh, I'm really vibing with her, she's really attractive, we get along well, that's still the uncle, that's still grandma, that's still grandpa. So if you know, hey, my future wife or my future husband needs to have a stable family, and they don't have that, kick them to the curb quickly so you can get to where you're supposed to be.
Yes. Good.
How do you think that happens though? Do you think that folks linger in situations that
Yes,
they shouldn't?
Yeah,
yes,
How do you
all
think
the
yes.
we
time.
Right, like how do you think we get to the point where folks are willing to have those conversations? I mean, because it's interesting, like, Nicole, you kind of pointed to it. Like you were coming from one perspective, potentially your husband was coming from a different perspective, and they worked together, but there wasn't necessarily that conversation about these are my boxes, these are your boxes, and we've got a meeting of the minds. How do we get to the point where we're having these conversations with each other? I mean, because again, we kind of talked about like you can click online and find all sorts of do this, do that, or folks who are saying they're gurus on relationships. How do we have these
What kind
conversations
of
in real
conversations are you
time?
having in the dating context when you're actually going out and spending your time, which is the most valuable resource you have with these people? What are you talking about? Are you talking about these difficult subjects? Are you asking these people, how do you feel about family? What's your family like? What do you want to do professionally? What don't you like about what you do? What do you directionally need to do to get to where you want to be? What does happiness look like for you? Where do you want to live? How do you feel about child rearing? Religion. Like if you were talking about partnering with these people and you were self-aware enough to know what you want and what you're seeking, and you're not having these conversations when you're dating, you're hanging out or doing whatever you're doing, you're not doing the fact finding to make the discernment. You are trying to obtain this information to say this fits my boxes or not, and do I continue to spend my time because I'm seeing things that check out, or do I need to cut my losses, which is my time, because these things do not fit? And I often find that people get caught in these like rosy places in dating. I feel this way, I'm excited, or this thing happened, or this person did this thing, or they seem all nice and glossy. And everybody's got their dings, everybody's got their nicks, all these different things that don't work. You're just trying to figure out, do those things that work and don't work with that person work for you? And if they don't, how quickly can you get your ass out of that situation and into a situation where it does work?
But yeah, I mean, that you're leading me, Cash, to a thought that I was having though, which is like, um, when you are thinking about what your boxes are, I think certainly there are non-negotiables for everybody, but I'm wondering if some folks have boxes that maybe they should reconsider, because the fact of the matter is there are not perfect people out here, and really I don't think anybody is going to check all of your boxes. And this kind of gets into a conversation of people tend, I think, to look at their romantic partners as the potential source of all emotional satiety and input that they need in their lives. And it's a lot to put on. We want grace for ourselves, but we are so harsh on our potential partners and what they are supposed to be offering and giving to us, and we expect them to fill us up. And so just to throw in there that, like, you've got to have you have to have realistic expectations, right? And just understand that there's probably no one who's going to check every single box.
Well, you also have to, like, women in particular tend to veer away from the conversations that Cash is talking about, because people are trying to, I hate this phrasing, but I'm going to use it, get chose, right? Like, I want to be the one that you pick. And there's this whole like pick me thing. And they're so busy. People are so busy being like, I want to present to be that person to fit your list. You told me your list, I want to fit your list, instead of being like, it's just like I mean, I hate to say it, it's just like a job interview, right? People forget, when you go out and interview for a job, you are interviewing the job just as much as they are interviewing you. Dating is at its core basically that. And so instead of showing up as your authentic self, each person, and then saying, does this fit or not? And it's okay if it doesn't, cut your losses early and keep moving. It's, let me try to make it fit, because the statistics say I'm gonna be out here for a minute and it's gonna be hard and I'm not gonna find my equal or the person that I expect to be my partner. And you start looking at really superficial stuff, but we just don't have the conversations for fear of the conversation making you be the person that they don't want to engage with. And like I think that's a big part of our
Rejection.
breakdown.
People are afraid of being rejected.
That's it.
I think the first thing that people need to do, if you're out here dating and you are Black in America, get your ass a therapist. Like you cannot be out here navigating and trying to make up for, centuries of discrimination and persecution and destruction of the family, and then trying to find your partner and get over all your own family trauma and your own personal issues without some professional help. So I think people who are serious about the inner journey have to also engage in that part of the discussion before they go find their like forever person. You have to clean your shit up.
That is a word right there.
Yeah, yeah. And I also think that when you're talking about finding your forever partner, the fact of the matter is that Nicole said it, there's no perfect person. Right. So in the evaluation process, one of the most important things is how committed are they to working together with you? Right? Because once y'all get together, there's some things that mesh, and then there's some things that y'all gonna have to work through collectively, and you're gonna have to address your own issues. Like, hey, I told the girl her house wasn't too clean. Guess what? My kitchen might not be too great either. So I have to, recognize that I have flaws as well. And not only is personal therapist important, but marriage counseling is important too.
Absolutely.
So that you guys can communicate and collectively move forward together. So that intentional dating phase goes into that intentional spousal or couples phase where you all are trying to move together as a team.
And that's counseling throughout, right? Not waiting till there's a fire. But like you
ongoing.
And before
ongoing. Yeah. You should just be therapy because you exist and you need help.
And before, right.
Well, I mean, listen, you're not gonna go get your oil changed when your car breaks down, right?
Yeah.
You're gonna get routine maintenance because if you want to keep your car running, you got to change the oil, you got to rotate the tires, you got to flush the fluids. Same thing with your mental state, your personal relationship. You quarterly, go on in there and get a checkup, see where you at, as a couple. And that's how you keep your car running for 10 plus years.
But I think I do want to just come back and emphasize a point, Raashid, that you made, which is when you're in that, if your objective is to be in a traditional marriage, and we can get into people's life choices and what makes sense for them, which I'm all for. But if you want to be in a traditional marriage, I think what you said is maybe should be everybody's number one box, which is, when the going gets tough, and believe me, it will, and it always does, and it will repeatedly. Are you going to stay in the bunker? Are you going to stay in the boat? Are you going to stay on the team? Are you going to be committed to working through it? Because in my opinion, to be married in the modern age is to confront at one point or another the fact that there are going to be moments when you really don't like your spouse, and you're going to be like, I really don't want to be with you right now at all. But, are you committed to the work? And that's something we lose sight of in this, off the shelf, ready-made, everything fast, easy kind of society that we live in. Marriage is work, and it's work on you. Marriage shows you your shit. Mm-hmm. That's what we don't like.
Yeah.
It's a mirror like none other.
It is a mirror like none other. And marriage is not about making you happy. So if that's what you think, if that's why you want to be married, don't do it. Because it won't.
Well, let's get into that though, because marriage has clearly evolved over, the centuries. And so no longer are we in a position where, folks have to get married for the purposes of security and, having a chance at, living and surviving.
Right.
Do we feel, like Rashida, you talked about the, let's have the three houses in a marital construct. I mean, folks can want a life partner, but not necessarily a marriage. Like, how do we feel marriage fits in modern society? And if marriage is the route, how do we feel like the institution itself needs to evolve to keep up? Like, is it shifting from something that's more traditional to something that's more of a equal partnership than it may have been even a couple decades ago? Like, what are your thoughts?
I defer to the married folk on this one. As a single person, I have an opinion, but not
I'd be
as a
interested to hear
non-married
your
individual.
opinion.
So look, I think my perspective on marriage is very unique and has been since I was 18, 19 years old. I see it as a partnership on multiple levels. So like deciding who you marry and how you're going to build your life is very much about what you want from it. So as an individual, I think I lean towards wanting a more traditional marriage, but I am also a person that is exclusively interested in professional women. And I like a certain characteristic of it. And it's not necessarily that there is a job or a thing that they do. It is a set of tools and character traits that professional women seem to have. And one of the things Raashid was talking about earlier is there's a certain level of comfort that you have in knowing the capability of the skill set of your partner. So when you are not present or you're not around, you're not able to do things, you choose. So for me, I'm probably going to be a person that's always in a work mode of, high intensity, high impact, very stressful things. That is the life that I have chosen. And choosing a partner for me is like, well, to balance out these things that I know that I'm going to be doing, I need someone who's going to help to offset that, but also complement that as well. And so I look for probably more tradition in the outcome, but I look for a certain type of preparation in the partnership. There is a profile of a person that I am going to be interested in because of who I am. And so no matter what people do, there's a certain profile of person that will never fit into that. And so for me, when I think about the context of the type of marriage that I want or would have, there is a universe of marriages of certain types of people that most people probably would identify as power couple that I would find myself in a union with. Outside of finding myself in a relationship that leads to something like that, I'm probably not headed in the direction of a marital situation, no matter what happens, because I have this calculus that I am constantly working with in the background. These are the things that I want for my outcome. So this situation may not necessarily yield that. So that means this situation is finite. But when I get to the situation that is in that direction, these elements will be present, or I expect some of them to be present to allow it to move in that direction. I think that the construct of marriage is changing. I think that if you look at the numbers, you look at the math, you see that there are more people who are finding themselves not married, but obviously there are all these industries and things that are now showing you that people want to be together. People want to be partnered. I don't think that the traditional sense of marriage in this country is going to continue in the way that it has, but I don't think that people are going to stop finding ways to partner and align themselves. I think people naturally want to be in relationships, and I think most people would ideally find themselves in a romantic relationship with another person or being, based on some set of values and alignment. There are some people who probably do not want that and, probably want a different type of approach and will date as they can and interact as they can. You have to figure that out. But the people that want to be married, I think, are going to have to evolve and adapt to the way marriage looks like now. And we've done that, though. If you think about in the 50s and 60s, the way that the marital situation looked in the country was very different. Man goes out, works, woman stays at home, takes care of kids. We've progressed to a situation of where there are now more professional women than men. If you follow the numbers of what's going to happen, you watch all the graduate programs, you watch where women are coming into the boardroom, where women are coming into corporate America, and you play that out 10 to 20 years from now, you can see that the dynamics of where women sit in the social contract are going to be different. So where they sit in the marital contract is going to be different. And people all have to adapt to that reality. So it's going to happen. I just don't know that people are focused on how these things are changing and know to move in that direction proactively.
I mean, I agree. I think the marital construct has changed, and to put the fine point on it, I think into history, people married mostly for economic reasons and for survival. Sean, as you said, I think now we look at, you know, marriage as the primary relationship in our lives, and a source of stability, a source of partnering and moving through life together. And, you know, the other piece of that, you know, is a reality, I think, for folks, is a lot of people, you know, they want to have kids. They want to have a family. And, you know, traditionally that looks like, you know, a mom and a dad who are married and kids, and to provide a stable home for children. And I think that motivates a lot of people to get married as well. But I do think folks are looking for more out of their partners, like I said earlier, in terms of an emotional outlet. And I think marriage can be a really beautiful vehicle to help us work through whatever traumas we have faced in our lives to that point. It can be a wonderful vehicle for healing, and a great source of satisfaction and love in our lives. But it is certainly the case that we're looking for deeper meaning from the marital relationship than a generation or two ago.
Well, and I think we're looking for more partnership, right? Like, and I say that in the sense of, it is easy to talk about marriage and partnership and say, okay, in the context of, like, we'll use Cash's power couple reference, right? Like, whatever your dynamic is, but, you know, can I bounce stuff off of you? Can I kind of, like, do I have somebody that is really kind of riding with me, helping me think through things, you know, whether it's the most trivial thing or the most complex thing. The piece about a lifelong partner, whether within a marital context or not, particularly when you have children, is partnership emerging there. And that is a place that I think we really still have a lot more work to do in terms of how we evolve in marriage. Because even in all of that, again, data, articles, research, you can find it all. The weight and the burden of caring for the family tend to fall on the wife in the relationship.
Yes.
And I don't want to be fair and balanced, because we're not just always just talking about male female partnerships. So, like, somebody is going to take that role on.
Yeah.
And that is a heavier burden. So now you've got somebody who is rocking and rolling professionally and taking on a heavier burden in the home. That part of the partnership of marriage needs to evolve, and is evolving, but needs to continue to evolve, so that, and sometimes it's on us. I'm gonna be real honest. So sometimes we tend to take on that burden heavier and say, just help me where I ask you to, instead of having that upfront and continuous conversation about how we jointly work together to raise our family. Somebody tweeted yesterday, and I fell out laughing. It was a screenshot of a text message between her and her husband, and he was like, hey, you know, are you coming in the house? And her do not disturb, you know, auto message, like, I'm driving, do not disturb, popped up. And he was like, if you don't get in this house, she was sitting in the driveway in her car. And I was like, first of all, I feel the sitting in the driveway and not coming in the house for a few minutes. But, like, that whole thing of, like, no, you got to get in here and raise these kids together. Like, how do we do these things truly together? And yes, we all gonna need to escape from these kids one day. But, like, that's kind of, I think that's the piece that we sometimes miss when we talk about partnership, is full partnership across the board, not just on the stuff that everybody else sees and that looks good.
So I'm gonna make an admission before I make any more commentary. Before I go pick up my kids from daycare, I sit in the parking lot of that daycare for a strong 5-10 minutes. You know, just to, you know,
Get your mind together.
get my mind together. Let's do a little jazz or something. Like, okay, now you got transition from work mode to dad mode, and it's a different mindset. But in the context of mindset, I will say that marriage is evolving, and you know, adults have to find the partnership that works best for them. When I was growing up, my image of marriage was my grandparents. Both of them are still alive. They've been married now probably close to 70 years. And I remember before I got engaged to my wife, I sat down with the ring, I showed it to him, and I said, "All right, Grandpa, I'm about to get engaged, man. Like, yo, what's the key? Like, how did you make this marriage work with Grandma?" He said, "Look, your grandma was the woman I chose." And that was it, right? And he chose her in college. And when I say they went through it, he was in World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. Raised 3 girls. He went out to war. She stayed home and took care of the kids. His professional life flourished. Hers did not. She sacrificed it for the benefit of the family. But at 94 years old, he's like, "Oh, she's the woman I chose." That's that. And it was that simple for him at that time. And mind you, we're talking going through segregation, mid-50s, you know, the whole deal. But, you know, when he sees me now with my children, he says, "Man, you're a way better father than I ever was, because you're more engaged. You do things that traditionally my wife would do, and I never would. I'd come home and kind of pat him on the head, give him a little money, and, you know, maybe put him to bed, but that was about it. I'm into everything."
Yes.
And so generationally, you know, what we've seen historically has to now adapt to what we're going through currently. And in this context, you know, when I'm into everything, you know, my kids just went to tennis class. My wife took them to a little tennis court class. I'm packing the go bag, you know, while my wife is getting herself together so she could take them, you know. So when she comes downstairs with the shoes on, ready to rock, here's your bag, here's some water, here's some juice, here's some Fruit Loops, off you go, you know. And so that partnership thing, that's a real deal thing, because now you're talking about the logistics of running a semi-large organization.
Yes.
You're running a house business.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly.
And let's talk, I mean, life is really complicated in the modern era. It's so complicated, and everything is coming at you so fast. There is no end to the workday, like, and then the pressures on women. I mean, we haven't even talked about, you know, how, you know, women are supposed to, you know, you're supposed to be, you know, professional and kicking ass in your career and mother of the year and homemade cookies for the class and room parent and, you know, sexy and beautiful, and you're not supposed to age and you got to get your Botox. I mean, it's on and on and on. But yeah, I kind of to echo what Raashid was saying in terms of my own marriage, and we have 2 daughters, 10 and 8. And I mean, I could not possibly do what I do professionally if I did not have Chris Edmonds doing what he does with our girls and with our family. I mean, we are, you know, what are the interchangeable pieces, except for the hair.
I don't
the girls' hair.
I don't do hair.
I watched that
I don't
LL
do hair.
Cool J commercial many years ago, and I just know it's gonna be that lopsided. Ask your mom to help.
Everything else, you know, I mean, I do keep the family schedule, as Raashid told me this morning, you know, like there's that white side of me that comes out, and a little bit of control freak, you know. It's like, I know who I'm the traffic controlled cop, but otherwise, you know, he is knee deep in it with me, and there's just no way this would work if he weren't, you know. And it's not to say there aren't pinch points and it isn't hard at times and we don't knock heads, because we certainly do, but yeah, that is the new model. Yeah.
Y'all are part of the couples that I look at and I'm like, I love how y'all rock. Like, I love how you flow together, how you give each other space to be yourselves. And you have your couple identity too. It's just something that I greatly admire and look to and love to see with y'all. And it's just been fun to watch over the years.
Thank you. And let me toss this out for free to the ladies, and maybe Raashid and Cash, you can tell me if this is right. But something I have learned over the years, I've been married almost 12 years now, is it's really true, that statement that, you know, women look for love and men look for respect. And I do everything in my power. And some people might be like, oh, well, you know, why are you bowing down? Or, you know, you should never make yourself smaller for your man. And I don't think of it that way at all. Whenever we are in public and at home too, but whenever we're like, like, I let him be out front. Like, he is the man. Everybody knows my credentials and how great I am. Like, I don't have to show off, but like, I let him be the lead. I let him be the head. I praise him in public. I respect him, you know, and I listen to his counsel and his advice. And, you know, we have a more traditional Christian marriage. I look at it, you know, he's my cover. When we are trying to deal with something, you know, we'll duke it out and I'll be like, I think it should be this way. And I will present my compelling arguments because, of course, I'm the lawyer in the family. And usually my argument wins the day, but I make sure that he understands, like, he has the final say. Like, here's all the reasons why we need to do it this way. But whatever you decide at the end of the day, that's what we'll go with. And it's, you know, it's negotiation and everything is compromised, blah, blah, blah. But I think that has really made a difference in the happiness of our marriage, is me understanding that him, me not being snappy and always talking back and cutting him down. Like, I try to build him up.
Well, I'm just going to say this real quick, since, we're talking about Chris Edmonds, shout out to the good bros real quick, what I'm saying, doing big things in marriage. But yeah, I remember when y'all got married, and the preacher, what you just said, that was his sermon. Remember, he was like, yo, respect him. And he was like, love her. Chris was like, all right, got it. Love her. Got it. Yeah. Can we move on to the vows now? But no, it's true. Like, and yeah, I'm the military guy on the panel, right? Like, everything that I kind of view through this military prism, since I've been doing it since I was like 13 years old. But I remember when me and my wife got married, we went through the same marriage counseling as Chris and Nicole. They had a household thing or whatever. And I said, look, a marriage is kind of like a military unit. You've got your commander and you got your first sergeant. And your first sergeant quietly runs the whole unit. It doesn't matter how many people are in the unit. First sergeant does everything. But in the end of the day, the commander is responsible for what happens. So if you come in the house and you flick that switch and no lights come on, that's not your wife's fault. It's your fault, because you ain't paid the bills. Now, when things go well in the household or in that unit, you're gonna put that on, you heap that praise on your wife and your kids. But when things go wrong, the man has, in my view, has to take responsibility for that and say, all right, where did I fail this unit in helping them succeed? And, in many ways, what I've seen as, me and my wife have progressed in marriage, and what I've seen traditionally from my parents and my grandparents is that partnership aspect, as we're talking about intentional dating and then moving into marriage and then moving into the partnership aspect, man, it grows over time. The husband I was, at the beginning of the marriage ain't the dude I am now.
Mm-hmm.
And I have had to really, work on myself in the context of my marriage and say, okay, where can I be a better foundation for the family? And, Ron, you're right. It's about, I got me a therapist back in like 2017. And I thought I was doing it because I thought I had some problems with PTSD, and it was affecting my household because I was snappy, short-tempered, and stuff was going on. But even when I left the military, it evolved into this whole concept of self-development and how can I be a better foundational piece for this entire family. And you got to bring in your partner too. And I had to bring in my wife, and we kind of worked it through or whatever. But these modern day marriages, there's peaks and valleys, man. And you got to be able to roll with roll that roller coaster until you until you finally get to your station.
And I think what you guys are both talking about comes from that growth together and that mutual, what you both express, both Nicole, as you talk about Chris, and Raashid, as you talk about yourself, is doing the inner work so that it is easy to say, yep, no, if this is the dynamic that you choose, like, yes, I am submission and the concept of submission, there are all kinds of debates about it, but it is all very seamless and easy when everyone is walking in who they are supposed to be, and a mutual respect. And for women, it manifests in how we are loved and how well we are loved, and for men can manifest in how well you are respected. But it comes from that growth together. I think I've shared this in another one of our episodes, but for this, I think it's appropriate. I remember this book, not a marriage book, some other kind of book, but he talked about he and his wife had been married for 18 years. Their marriage was now an adult. And that just always has resonated with me, of this idea of if that is what you seek, when you first start out, it's like a baby. And you have to nourish it, and you have to give it more time and more attention, and you kind of go into this little bubble in some ways, right? Because that's where you need to focus. But just like life, and your life goes in stages, things will change and evolve over time. So my parents just celebrated their 50th anniversary 2 months ago. Like you, Raashid, my grandparents my maternal grandparents are still living. They've been married for 73 years now, I think it is. And so, when you see those as a model, you think that when you first get married, that's what your marriage is going to look like. That's a no.
Yeah.
Stop looking at your parents and your grandparents as the model for you, because they grew up in different eras and had different dynamics.
They had different eras and different dynamics, and they done worked through some stuff that you don't know nothing about.
None about it.
Will. Yeah.
Yes.
Nothing about that journey that they went on. And so you have to go on your own journey, and you have to nurture and grow your marriage and relationship. And one day it'll be an adult, and it'll look like that. To somebody else, but don't walk in the door. I said this on my in my post for my parents' 50th. I have been in the room. These two jokers will be across the room, make eye contact. Sounds like they made 3 grunts, and that was a whole conversation, and they are on the same page. Yeah. You can't do that on day one.
Nope. That is earned.
That is earned. That is earned.
Yeah. I mean, if I have heard people in marriages talk about their marriage like they've been through combat.
Man.
Like they are veterans. Like, yo, I've been married 27 years, man. I ain't got no time to do this. It's like, man, you've been shot at, bro. But in his mind, literally he knows his journey, or she knows her journey, and they know how much they've had to overcome and persevere to still be standing 27 years later. And the thing about marriage that is not considered when you're in the initial dating stage is that it's going to grow like a human being does. Mm-hmm. And unless you're committed to working together to deal with the bumps and the bruises and the growing pains and the adversity, it will never mature to that final stage. So in the early stage, when you're like, yeah, this girl's cool, or this dude is cool, how well do y'all work together? How well do you communicate with each other, and how committed are you to continuing? because when you get into kids are born and babies screaming and it's 3 a.m. and who gonna go get them or her, or, you know, somebody's sick, but I can't go. Like, how are y'all gonna navigate those things on a day-to-day basis? And that becomes that next level of partnership where you go beyond just the superficial aspects of a person and start to really get to the core of how committed are you to something that's greater than yourselves individually.
Well, I think that's a perfect segue as we begin to wrap up. Are there any golden nuggets that you would like to share with our viewers so that, you know, we don't have to live through everything to have experience? Sometimes we can learn from the wisdom of others. Is there anything each of you would like to share with folks as we prepare to close out?
Stop
I just
always
wanna-
having to be right.
Mm.
See, no, I mean, it sounds like, you know, this like little sound bite. And I mean, our egos loom so large, but and I am a rush. All y'all know, really. I mean, I am snappy and spicy and difficult, and I love to be right, but there's just not a lot of room for that if I'd like to have peace in my house. And so, but in relationships also, just to stop having to. It's not a zero sum I win you lose proposition. Everybody can win and you can have peace, but when you let your ego get in the way and you always got to be right, you lose. Everybody loses. That's my nugget.
You can win that battle and lose the war.
That's right.
I'm gonna steal a term I got from Cash about doing a relationship autopsy. That's what it was.
Oh,
Relationship autopsy. And I think it's important, especially if you come out of a long-term relationship, whether it's a marriage or something else, but something, or even something that was like a deep relationship for you, to take that time to do the work, to assess what happened, go to therapy, you know, like spend the time really understanding what you're learning out of it and what role you played in it. And sometimes nobody's at fault, but there's always a lesson. It's not necessarily somebody broke something or something went wrong, but there is a lesson to learn from that. And it's really important to give yourself the space and time to be able to do that, because that is part of a healing process. And if you don't do that, if you don't take the time for that, you're going to take that into the next thing. And that's just you're going to leave a trail of damage behind you if you take that forward with you.
My piece of advice would, there's been a couple of things I've offered, but in the context of people trying to find partnership, it starts with like self and the self work. So when we were talking about the therapy and kind of being honest about what you want, being able to communicate and being intentional up, I want people to understand, like, whether or not you end up in a partnership or a union, a lot of it is going to start with the work that you do on yourself first. So like thinking about how you end up externally in all these wonderful situations that you may dream or think about, it actually starts with doing the things that you need to do to improve yourself, to make you the kind of person that someone else would wake up every day and choose.
So I'm gonna piggyback off of Cash real quick. I think that therapy and marriage counseling are two things that are greatly underutilized in the Black community. Mm-hmm. And I can just speak from experience when I say that I didn't appreciate its benefits until I had to get it. But once I got it, I was mad at myself that it took me that long to find it, especially since it was free for basically all of my 20s and 30s. But I will say that, you know, if there is one nugget I would give, it is that, you know, marriage counseling, whether it be religious or non-religious, and therapy are very useful tools in both couples development and self-development, and navigating the twists and turns of modern marriage. It ain't that costly, but it's really, really valuable.
Well, guys, are there any other thoughts anyone wanted to touch on before we close out? Because this has been so fruitful and I've loved this discussion we've had today. And
Yeah,
so,
thank you so much, Raashid and Cash, for blessing us with your presence and your thoughts. We don't often, I think, Black women, we don't always get that view into the Black man's mind. And so those nuggets were really, really appreciated.
Thank you, guys.
Thank
so
you for having me.
everyone, that's gonna wrap us up for season 2. We hope that you have gotten a lot out of this episode. I feel like this could have continued for hours, but in the interest of keeping it concise, we'll close out here and we will see you all in season 3. Thanks again, everyone.
Deuces.
Bye.